Karen with the Writer's Edge. I'm so excited that you are joining with us today to talk about rugby recruiting and some updates on what's been going on now that we are into the end of 2020. Joining me today, we have Justin Hundley, head coach of Penn State men's rugby. We have Josh Macy, head coach at Lindenwood University men's rugby. And last but not least, Coach Matt Sherman with Army West Point. I am re-recording this intro because the live webinar had a little bit of technical difficulty, so I cut that part. And without further ado, we're going to jump right into the webinar on the other side. Thanks so much, and I hope you enjoy.
It's a pleasure to be on with yourself, Josh, and Matt. As Karen mentioned, Justin Hundley, the head coach, Penn State men's rugby. A little bit about our school. We're obviously we're a big state school, 45,000 undergrads. Our program sits in a team sport band at Penn State, which not varsity, not club, so we sit right in the middle. And just happy to be on here and provide some information about our program.
Great. Josh, I think you're up.
Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Macy. I work at Lindenwood University, just outside of St. Louis, Missouri. We're a kind of a Goldilocks-sized school. It's a beautiful place, but not too expensive, especially after you take into account academic and athletic scholarships. We sit in varsity space in our athletic department with, about 30 other sports. We're a top 5 program in the United States, and I'm excited to be here with you guys and see all your questions.
Great. And then Coach Sherman.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and you organizing it. And small world. Karen and I actually went to high school together. So it's cool to be reunited. And thanks to all the families for making time. Yeah, Matt Sherman, head coach at Army West Point, otherwise known as United States Military Academy, very unique institution. And we're a varsity program here. My background, I went to Cal, coached at Cal, and also coached at San Diego State and Stanford. So I'm happy to answer questions that relate to those programs as well. It's the rugby's a bit of the wild west as it comes to recruiting. And especially with COVID, I'm sure there's a lot of confusion. So hopefully we can provide clarity for you today. So thanks for being here and thanks for having me, Karen.
Great.
Yeah.
So I think if we can actually, I know we just had everyone introduce themselves, but if you can give the folks in here a little bit of an update on what the season or non-season, just what it's been like on your campus currently. So obviously we just went through a first semester. What did that look like? Did you have rugby, or if not rugby, what did you do as a team? So let's kind of start there. Matt, you're still on screen, so I don't know if you just want to kick us off with that. Like, what's it been like right now on your campus?
Interesting. But yeah, we can control more things being a military installation and an academy. So we came back at the beginning of the fall. In fact, we came back early and all the cadets tested and then quarantined. And we began a very long, slow, arduous return to play process. We were in small groups with gloves and no balls, and kind of it evolved over time. And we were fortunate enough to be one of the only teams to actually play a game this fall. We got to play Navy and beat Navy, gotta say. Yeah, that was our only game. We were scheduled to play 2 others, and due to COVID, those got called off. So yeah, we were fortunate that we were able to compete.
Great. Coach Macy, what about you? What was life like at Lindenwood?
It's certainly not the typical college experience right now, but we just kind of went off the motto that just because this semester was going to be different doesn't mean it couldn't be good. So we had a return to play protocol that we worked with our athletic department in establishing, where we could do surveillance testing, we could quarantine guys as we went, and we were confident moving forward each step of the way because we had good testing procedures in place. And that ended with a series of inter-squad scrimmages that we were really happy to be able to provide our students and give them kind of a game day experience, but at home. And we even had, a little bit of a student crowd come in and things like that. So look, it's a lot different, but we're looking forward to this spring. We have agreements in place with a handful of other great rugby schools that want to play and have the same support and safety in mind that we do. And we're just looking forward to January.
Yeah, I think we all are. Coach Hundley, and last, what about you? How's it been over at Penn State?
Yeah, our experience has been a bit different from both Josh and Matt. Unfortunately, we weren't able to really get on field at all at Penn State this semester. The guys have been in the gym. We did a little bit of skill work early on, but that that fizzled out pretty quickly. So a lot of time spent on Zoom meetings. I think the guys are all pretty sick of those. I think as most of us are, but it was a good opportunity to work on some background stuff that we typically don't get to do. So focus on some academics, spend some time on some playbook stuff that we wanted to implement come springtime, and then work on our internal team culture. A lot of talking around that, little small groups, and how we want to be seen and how we want to behave as a team moving forward, which we're in a good place, but I think we can all constantly get better in those areas. So that was we took this fall to use the opportunity to do that.
Great. Yeah. So yeah, obviously, kind of piggybacking on what Coach Macy was saying, kind of looking ahead, right? And I think a lot of the families that signed up to join us tonight are in grade 11. They've had a rough go of this, obviously no spring season last year, no fall season for many students, and then questionable whether or not they'll have a spring season. And there are lots of questions, and if someone wants to kick us off, that's great. So a couple questions here about, how do I work to get noticed? How can I help my team become more successful? And I'm going to add on to that with how do I work to get noticed, from each of you in the absence of games, tournaments, things like that? Are there things that student athletes can still do right now if they're class of 22, so they're juniors right now, that would get on your radar, that would help them even though they don't have actual maybe game film?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump in there. I think the first thing I would do is put together a rugby resume or CV, whatever you want to call it, but something that on paper that highlights who you are, not just as a rugby player, but as a person, as a leader, as a teammate, as an athlete, but also, of course, as a rugby player. I think that's a good for a coach to have to get to know you. I think with that in hand, I would. That's certainly capable in these times through email, depending on how much film you have access to. If you didn't play this fall or last spring, I would still recommend trying to put together some sort of highlight film. I personally like highlight films more than full games. I just don't have the time to watch a full game. And I enjoy watching football and wrestling and other sports as much as rugby. I think the reality of our sport is it's emerging, and the athlete pool is stronger and more mainstream American sports. So I would love to see any interested party playing rugby, but also their highlights in football and other sports. Lastly, in absence of film, which is certainly more common right now, I'd also say coaches' letters that speak to your character and athleticism can be of value, and any sort of numbers in terms of strength and conditioning numbers and speed numbers and testing numbers. That might be something you can get done even though you can't play a team sport right now. So those would be a few things that would be at the forefront for me that you can do. Maybe not all, but some.
I get that question a lot, actually. In terms of those strength and conditioning, the stats type piece, are there a few common ones that you look for or you would like to see, that if students have access to a gym, to a field, that they could do that would be helpful for you?
Yeah, I just say speed and strength. So things like 40s, 40 times, 100 times speed to me is probably we want to play fast and speed is probably the most important thing. Explosive power as well. So things like vertical jumps, box jumps. I would say power cleans, but I'm aware that that's not being taught a lot of the time at the high school level. So I certainly wouldn't encourage anybody to try and max out on a power clean if they haven't been professionally coached at it. But and then just general strength, squats, deadlifts, bench press, things like that.
Okay, great. Coach
I think
Macy, oh yeah, or sorry, whoever wants to jump in.
No, I was just going to say, I would echo Matt's statement on all of that. I think a good fitness standard test that a lot of people are using is the Bronco. And it's really easy to set up 20, 40, 60 meters, 5 times, run it through, send your times over. That's a good fitness assessment on top of those strength pieces. And then just in terms of some of the video, if you haven't played, and if there's, like Matt said, film from other sports is great, but, I'm always happy to watch, a guy work on skills, even if he's getting out to a field by himself, prop up his iPhone, so show some catch pass, show some kicking skills, things like that, that can set you apart from others.
Okay. Josh, anything different?
I would suggest so for instance, we have a pretty thorough recruiting questionnaire that we send interested students or, players that we meet or have our eye on. And you'd be surprised how many times people leave something blank on it, right? And you want to help us get to know you with as many different facets of your experience and personality as possible. So even if you don't think we care about something, like if you volunteer at the Renaissance Festival and can juggle, just tell us that. Like, one, you probably have pretty good hand-eye coordination, right? There's probably some transferable skills there, but we want to know, we want to know just anything about you that you want to share, and that standard fitness test that Coach Hundley mentioned is the Bronco. We keep, kind of fitness standards for each position using that test. And we share that with recruits as well, but by position, and like he said, it's 20, 40, 60 meters down and back 5 times without stopping.
Great. Okay, I'm just going to go through some questions, and obviously folks that are online, feel free to submit others. Due to the onset of the pandemic, will students that graduated in 2020 and took a gap year due to COVID be eligible for recruiting as an incoming freshman? So basically they've taken this year off. Could they be, basically, are they still eligible to be a freshman, I think is the question.
As long as they haven't completed any college work at all, like, if you took a community college class or flirted with some online courses somewhere, you'll be considered a freshman. It's called first time full time, right? As it's your first time enrolled full time in a university, you'll be counted as a freshman. At least at Lindenwood, likely Penn State. Coach Sherman, you might be in a different boat.
Yeah, in Army, we're unique, so we're the minority here. But you start with 0 credits here, no matter, you could come with a bachelor's degree, but you would start with zero credits. So, but the anomaly. So I wouldn't pay too much attention there.
Everybody,
would you, Coach Sherman, would you look at someone who took a year off? Is it possible for them to still, is it already too late in the process? I guess I'm actually thinking for seniors, 21s, or those who took a gap year, could they still get in touch with you now? Or is that incoming class of 21 already complete at this point?
For us, and I'll let the other coaches speak to that, it would be very hard at this point. It wouldn't be, it could potentially be too late. We're unique in that we require congressional nomination. So that's another hurdle. But listen, I would just say to anyone, if you're interested, reach out to your coach, take the proper time to put together a professional email that present yourself in the right light, and reach out to a coach and express your interest. And you don't have to say, you don't have to say, I'm all in, it's all I want to do, if that's not how you feel about it. So you can say, hey, I just want to explore it. That's fine too. We're not offended. I think genuinely coaches want to help young men, because we're men's programs here, get to the right place. And we recognize that's not for all of you. That's not our institution. Certainly for me, that's not the case. But we want to help you get to know our option and then decide whether it's right for you. And in terms of that timeline, if you're a senior now, I'd say give it a try. And if it doesn't work out, then you can explore coming at it next year. For us, we have a lot of guys who come in after a year of school elsewhere, or we have had guys who've taken a year off. So it's not totally uncommon for us.
Yeah, from Penn State's perspective, Penn State's admission runs on a rolling admission. So I think that deadline actually to apply isn't for another few months. So if you're a senior and haven't made that decision yet, it does get harder and harder to get in the later you wait, because obviously there's more people that have applied. But that at this point, I don't think you're too late.
Josh, what about
Same
you?
here.
Lindenwood, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, rolling admissions. We routinely accept students in the summer up until the fall. I mean, things happen for students at different times. We recognize that, and it's good to be supportive and there for students if maybe their first option doesn't work out or anything like that.
Great. I had a question here about this is interesting. So top tips on what coaches look for or what they might look at on social media. Do you look at social media? I get this question quite a bit too, in terms of recruiting, some things that are good, things that are bad. Can you share a little bit about that?
A huge turnoff for me. I want to take a moment to rail against the football recruiting Twitter that I'm sure everybody's familiar with now. So it's basically when you have a call with a coach, you immediately put it on Twitter, not because you're genuinely excited about talking to that coach or that school. It's just because you're trying to drum up interest, right? Oh, well, Coach Macy talked to this kid on Twitter, so he must be pretty good. So now maybe another coach will notice and they'll want to call you too. And I compare that to when you guys are all looking for prom dates, right? Let's say you finally mustered up the courage and asked a girl to prom, and instead of saying yes or no, she went to Twitter and was like, I am blessed and appreciative to get an offer to prom from Tommy Two Shoes. My recruiting is still open. You would probably be put off by that. And so I would avoid some of the pitfalls from what you see people doing in football and basketball. Just play your cards a little closer to your vest when it comes to social media, right? Obviously don't portray yourself to be a worse person than your mother thinks you are on social media. And if you do those two things, you'll probably be all right.
Justin, do you look at social media at all?
I'm pretty old school. I don't. I have a social media account, but honestly, I don't get on there very often. For me, as Matt mentioned earlier, a well-written email or filling out our recruit questionnaire is probably the best way to get in contact with me. And then we'll have a conversation. Right now, we'll set up a Zoom call. We'll chat. Hopefully further down the line, we can more meet in person. But I think that to answer, the short answer is no, I don't spend too much time on social media.
Okay. Sherman, do you? I don't know if you do.
I don't even have Instagram, so I I'm a little behind the times, but yeah, we don't. But I will say what we do rely on heavily is speaking to players on the team who we know and we trust, about guys that they know, and then we really like when guys come visit, to have them come stay with the cadet on the team, to do a day in the life, to eat lunch with the team, to spend time. And that's where we get a majority of our feedback. We want to know that guys are going to have the respect of their peers here. And so that's what's really important to us. I will say this on the social media thing. We do have a meeting every year. We have this outside group who comes in and has a social media meeting with the team for about an hour. And before that meeting every year, they take all the freshmen and look up all their accounts and dig up the dirt And I'm in that meeting, so I see some of the stuff. And even here, where there's very high standards, and you know, at the risk of sounding a bit, you know, I don't know, arrogant, like there's some very high caliber young men here at the academy. You'd be amazed at some of the stuff they dig up of what they said at one point in their life, and they do it to teach them a lesson. And I just share this with everyone. And I don't know if all programs do this, but you know, that stuff's permanent. That digital stuff's permanent. So I like Josh's rule. You know, make it, what was it? Make it better than what your brother thinks of you. Phenomenal words to live by.
Yes. You know what, I'm getting some questions here, which I think it's good. It's always a reminder, because I do these talks all the time, and I think sometimes the lingo that we use, we assume everyone kind of knows what we're talking about, but we have questions about what is a recruiting questionnaire, where do we find it, and when should a student do that? So I don't know if we want to kind of go down, because I think the three of you might have something different. So Josh, maybe you want to start, like, maybe just tell us where can a student athlete find it for you? And then when would you like to see that recruiting questionnaire usually?
So it's never too early to do the questionnaire. And a benefit of that is it goes into a database that has all of our interested students, all the students we're interested in. And, you know, it helps us really, it helps us track contacts. So if we have a phone call, I can go into your profile in my database and I can leave my impressions of that phone call. And so really, until you do that questionnaire, I have no place to put those notes. And like, for instance, I have in mine now, I probably have 140 students in it. It's quite large, and it has multiple classes in it. And so you want to make sure that I have a place to put my impressions. I have a place to put your film or your recommendations or things like that. So Coach Hundley just put his in the chat. I'll drop mine in there as well. And again, it's never too early.
Okay. Matt, do you want to answer? I mean, so people who aren't on the chat, in case, because they might just be on their phone, typically you would, you know, if I were just to Google Penn State Rugby, you know, Army Rugby, and you find their website, usually it's in the top right, there's a drop down and it says recruiting questionnaire, prospect questionnaire, something like that. Usually I advise students, that's always the first step. You know, as Coach Macy said, they can't really do anything if they don't know you, right? So your first step is you've got to try to get as much information out there. And the first step is really to get yourself on this database. And what you might do before you start filling it out is look through the whole thing first, see what they're asking for. If you don't have that information, make sure you gather it before you send it in. You know, as Coach Macy said earlier, it doesn't help you as much if the only information you put in is your name and address. What they really want to see is also your, you know, your teams, your coaches' information, your high school, you know, ACT scores, GPA, SAT score, things like if you had it, right? You want to have all that stuff ready to go to put in versus let me just turn in something that's half empty. So yeah, so I do see some of the questionnaires that when I send out the email, I'll make sure to include those recruit forms as well. Justin and Matt, do you also agree? Is it ever too early, or is it, you know, when would you preferably like to see a recruit questionnaire from a student?
I'd agree with Josh. I don't think it's ever too early. Gives us information to, you know, like you said, put notes next to for all that haven't taken SATs, ACTs, obviously you can reach out to the coach again and say, I did really well, here's my score. You know, we update our records as you go. So yeah, never too early.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think the sweet spot is probably sophomore, junior year, because by then you have a bigger body of work. But I would say it's never too early to express interest. And yeah, we have a questionnaire on the admissions website. There's a recruiting website. But again, I just go back to email introductions. If you send me an email, for example, I will send back. I have a special separate recruiting signature where in the recruiting line, there's a link to a video on our facility, the recruiting process, a questionnaire. So it's all there. And I think with the digital world, it's pretty easy to get this stuff. But I think just go back to the old fashioned, just introduce yourself, and then we can go from there, and get the relationship going.
Great. I had a question about whether or not you have GPA or ACT, SAT standards. I can talk a little bit about testing right now in the pandemic, and I'll touch on that in a second. But do any of you, as you're getting those recruit questionnaires, are there any, is there GPA testing things you're looking for, or is that not anything you care about at this point? Matt, you can start.
Yeah, so West Point does not have certain numbers you have to be above. We kind of build an academic index built on an algorithm around test scores and GPAs and ranking class. So it all matters. It's good to get an idea, of sort of where you are, to oversimplify, very strong, middle of the pack, below, then we know, like, realistically where you might stand. But I'm also not the admissions expert at West Point, so I typically try not to make too many judgments. But yeah, it does help to know for me.
Coach Macy, anything about GPA, anything you're looking for, test scores?
Same boat, really. We're like, the admissions counselors are going to build a profile off of an index that we use. And so there's not a ton of hard stops. Obviously, if you're in the twos, you need to be nervous, right? And you need to make sure that you supplement your academic profile with as many additional, gold stars as you can, whether that be test scores, volunteering, whatever. But they're going to build an index off of you, and make sure that it's as strong as possible and as many different facets as possible.
Okay. Justin.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're a little bit different in that for guys that are in the twos, like it's going to be a really, really long process for you to get to Penn State, and the chance of you getting into main campus is probably pretty slim, to be honest with you. If you're a young guy and you're in that boat, or young woman and you're in that boat, that you've got time, so work hard. Academics is the most important thing that can get you into a school, hands down. Rugby can get you so far, but academics is going to get you into where you want to go. But if we're looking at Penn State's average numbers, we're looking between a 3.4 and a 3.9 GPA. Obviously people fall outside of that window, and a lot of that depends on where you come from, part of the country, things like that, number of kids who apply around you. Testing's an interesting one right now, and Karen, I know you're going to touch on that. So I won't get too much into the testing piece, because that's changed tremendously during this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to mention, obviously that's always a standard thing that we normally would talk about is, okay, we want to make sure you have plenty of time to plan for testing and those sorts of things. But with so many areas that aren't testing currently, so like my class of 21s, the vast majority of them have not taken an SAT or ACT. And what we found is the majority of colleges and universities have waived that requirement for this year. And some have already said they're going to extend it through till next year's application class. So I would certainly recommend, if you are a student, you're a grade 11, 10, 9, I would just keep an eye on it. I wouldn't count on, I've had some students that are like, yes, testing is waived, I don't need to do it. But some students really need the test, right? They're needing the test to actually lift up a lower GPA or to show that they can do the work. And obviously with the pandemic affecting the true strength of a GPA, you might find that there are some students that still need a test. And if it's possible to take it in your area, I would probably recommend taking it. It's just more evidence that you can do the work. But I would certainly, afterwards, when I send out the follow-up email, I will include all the coaches' emails. So if you have specific questions about your your GPA, I mean, I would certainly, I always say, go straight to the source, ask them, what they think and if they're waiving requirements or not with their recruiting class. Okay, I'm going to move on to another question here. I mean, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but we'd love advice on the best way to connect with coaches. And along with that, it was a question about, is it appropriate to visit during the junior year or the summer before senior year? And I'm going to pretend that the pandemic's let's hope that everything's better. So we're looking at maybe spring, summer. do they just show up? Do they email you ahead of time? What is the best way for them to connect with you in that sense, in person? Let's say it does open up and that's, available to them. What would be preferable for you?
So we're doing visits now, but we treat it just like we do getting ready for practice. Like the families have to certify that they don't have any COVID symptoms. We do temp checks in admissions before they go on a tour. We have protocols built around these things so we can have on-campus visitors.
Oh, okay.
So normally how it works is, they book a tour in admissions, and then we can supplement that with some time spent with a coach or some players.
Okay. So you are doing tours. Coach Matt, are you doing anything at West Point? Or if we're looking ahead at spring and summer, is there anything that you would recommend?
We are not right now. We are closed to the public, and I believe we will be for the foreseeable future. But assuming now, I'm talking to mostly class of 2022 or later. I would expect we'd be open next fall, and certainly for class of 2022. The fall is our preferred time of your senior year to come. Although, for younger guys, we would welcome you in the spring of your junior year. We just say reach out to us. Again, just let us know you want to come out, and we can work with you to set up that trip. So again, when you come on post, we set you up with a guy, and you stay with that cadet for most of the time. You get the real taste of what it's like to be a student, a cadet, a rugby player at the academy. So yeah, we want to work with you to create that experience. Yeah.
Okay. Justin, what about you? Our visit, I mean, it may not be happening now, but in the future, would you like students to come?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, right now there's no official visits happening at Penn State, and they're actually discouraging it. Pennsylvania is not in a good place with COVID right now. But yeah, if we look at a normal year, which hopefully we're back to, late spring, summer, I definitely encourage visits. I think it's important to see the place where you might end up at school, meet some of the players, meet some of the staff, see the facilities. I think all those pieces are important when you make that final decision, because all those bits do need to fit. You've got to make sure that where you are works for you. I think just showing up randomly and knocking on the door is probably not the best avenue to go. I'd prefer to know that someone's coming, because obviously, I know we're all fairly busy during the year, so sometimes it can be hard if someone just shows up. I know most of us would make the time. I know that all three of us would make the time, but it does make it a lot more difficult to get a good quality tour. But same with Josh is mentioning, set it up through admissions so you get that piece of the visit, and then we'll supplement it with some rugby stuff on the side.
So someone asked, would you suggest attending a camp? Do you recruit from those? And I know all three of you usually in a regular year would have a summer camp. So you're all shaking your heads. I'm going to assume that you do recruit from those. Can you just share, and I'm making an assumption, so you can say differently, but if you do recruit from a camp, what do you think you're looking for? Obviously there's some basic things, right? Like you're looking for whether or not they're strong, they're fast, all those sorts of things. Are there other things that students would be surprised to hear you're actually looking at a camp that they should be prepared for?
Yeah, I think comportment around the ground is huge. I've talked to Coach Sherman about this plenty of times as well. Like, do the other campers respond to you well? Do you exhibit leadership qualities? Are you a behavior risk? If you're why do I want to put up with that for 4 years if I can't put up with it for a 4-day summer camp, right? So there's a lot of little things like, do people hug you when you score a try? Like, do you do the same for them? I mean, those little things we look for all the time, and it's easy to look at on a highlight tape, but in 2-a-day practices and dog days of summer at a camp, we can kind of see your underbelly a little bit and really see what you're made of.
So definitely some character things come up in camp. Coach Sherman and Coach Hundley, anything that would be surprising for the families or for students to know you're actually looking at, or your staff is looking at during a summer camp?
I don't know if surprising. I would just echo Josh there. I mean, attitude first, athleticism second. Attitude sets the ceiling. And athleticism is sort of the basement. And I think most people think they just want to show you their skill and ability. Of course, you want to see that, but you know, it, it's a part of our team. It's a part of our culture, and that's what's more important than anything else. What kind of teammate you're going to be, what kind of leader, what kind of person you're going to be, and that's really really critical for us. And I know for these other coaches.
Yeah, I would 100% echo all of that. I think, we I think what kids don't realize is that we're watching all the time when we're at those summer camps, and we certainly do recruit from them. How do you leave the table when you get up after a meal? How do you treat the person that's serving the food in a line at the dining commons, right? All those little pieces, like Matt said, character is hugely important. And the other piece is sport is all about relationship, and that relationship goes both ways. So when you go to a camp, it's good for us to get to know you, but it's also good for you to get to know us, right? Because you're only going to play really well for a coach that you fit with their style and all that. And the same with the players that are on that roster. Do you fit in with that group, right? And does it how do you interact with them and their coaching at the camp? If it's, if I look at my Penn State camp, our players do a lot of the coaching. So what is your interaction like with them? And we're watching all that all the time.
Yeah, that's great. So I've had the luck of going to the U.S. Collegiate Development Camp hosted at Dartmouth with all three of you coaches. And I think one of the interesting things that that I have seen, I'm not a college coach, so a lot of the players don't think I'm looking at them from a recruitment standpoint, which I'm obviously not. I'm not with a college. However, I am just like Coach Hundley saying, I'm watching, and it's interesting to see the things that players do. One of the things I would mention is a lot of players tend to go to camps or tournaments and really kind of fade into the background, or they don't really stand out. They don't ever, let's say someone was really interested in Lindenwood. Even though Coach Macy is at the camp in front of them, they don't spend any time talking to him or making a point to say, hi, Coach Macy, my name's Johnny. I'm really interested in Lindenwood. I'd love to chat with you a little bit about the program, maybe over lunch tomorrow or something, right? They'll spend all 4 days like scared and they won't actually approach him. And this is your time. If you're at a camp, specifically for, Army, like find some time, introduce yourself. There's going to be 100 boys there. Make sure that you stand out. I also notice things like boys that are always late. They look really tired. They obviously can't manage their time. They know they have to be on the bus at 7 a.m. But, it becomes a running joke among all the players. They know who's always late. They know who's been staying up, streaming a show at night or something, and then they're just dragging around the next morning. So those things all, I would think, show a coach what you might be like when you're in college. So again, like when you're at a recruiting camp, you really should treat it like an opportunity and, do your best to show your best. Okay, we're starting to get to the end, so I want to make sure that we run through a few more of these questions. They want to know, do you recruit from other camps? So for example, an ERA camp, and do you go out to watch tournaments to recruit? And again, this is obviously in a non-pandemic year. Any thoughts about other camps? So not the ones you host at, and then also, do you go to other tournaments to watch?
For us, we go to some. Again, the number one thing for us, and I think the other coaches, my guess would be they would echo this, is that we do want interested parties to come to our camp to see our facilities, our culture, our campus. However, we do go to some, and I would say, but we limit that to what I would call, I guess, a more target-rich environment. The Dartmouth one you mentioned, we go to where we bring in a lot of different college coaches. Someone mentioned in the chat, these ERA camps. We go to their winter camp every year because there's a lot of guys down there in the high school American, the bigger camps. But we don't go to a ton. We probably spend more of our recruiting energy on spreading the word about who we are, communicating virtually, and trying to get guys to come to our camp where we can see them play.
And I think those organizations have done a really good job in recent years. Let's say you are at an ERA camp or a high school All-American camp, go and talk to the coaches who run that and say, hey, do you think you could connect me with the coach at Penn State, right? They know who we are, we know who they are, and then they can write you a recommendation, or they can email Coach Hundley and say, hey, I have Terry Two Shoes here that wants to go to Penn State. I want to connect you guys. It's a good way to, even if we're not there, it's a good way to kind of leverage those experiences and your coach's contacts there into maybe an introduction with one of us, if you feel more comfortable doing that versus a cold email, which we're all in support of, but it can help sometimes in that direction.
Okay. I had a question here. I think this is an interesting one. Does playing for a high school whose team isn't very good affect your recruiting chances? I actually have heard that question before is, what if you're just kind of in a region where maybe rugby's not great, or you're on a team that's not very good? Could that affect your chances, or what are some things they could do to improve those chances?
I don't think that necessarily hurts your chances. I don't think the team that you play on, I think that goes back to the character piece, right? So if you're the standout player on that team and your team's struggling, what are you doing as a leader in that situation to help your team get better, right? What resources are you seeking out to help your team become a better team? I think that pays dividends not only for yourself, but also for your teammates down the road. I don't think on-field results necessarily tell, what kind of player someone is.
And we can also see if those students are doing more. Are you taking the time to, so maybe your film isn't coming from your high school team. Maybe your film comes from video reviews at camps you go to, or things like that. Are you trying to find experiences outside of your high school team to continue to edify your love for the game and in your development as a player? And that shows a lot as well.
Yeah, I probably just echo those. I wouldn't say it hurts you, I'd say, but maybe you need to be work a little harder and be a little bit more proactive to get exposure for yourself, whether that's going to more camps or emailing more coaches. If you play for Jesuit Sacramento or Xavier New York, we're probably gonna, and you're a good player, you're probably gonna come across our radar as well as these junior academies or national teams. But if you're not, that you may not. So just I wouldn't be a victim to it. I'd just be proactive, and it shouldn't hurt you as long as you are.
We being in the Midwest, high school rugby isn't typically as strong here. We have a much wider footprint, but the level isn't as high. And so the majority of our American players don't come from, what you'd call marquee, high school programs, but those guys come in and they're hungry and they're hardworking. They have that Midwestern can-do attitude, and it goes well for them over time. Maybe there's an adjustment period, but it's certainly possible for those players to become, collegiate All-Americans and beyond.
Do you think each of you could share a little bit about what your team makeup looks like right now? So how big is the team? Do you have a separate freshman squad versus the team that goes to national championships? Do you break them up that way? Can players start as a freshman, or do they typically earn their way up? What does that process look like for students as they're thinking about fit? Because that's something I talk about all the time is some players might look at, your programs and I don't know, maybe they're like that top dog in their high school program, and it's actually going to be a little bit tough for them to show up somewhere where they're not the top dog, and they need to kind of think about that. So I don't know. So Coach Macy, since I've got you on right now, can you share a little bit about what your team makeup looks like, and maybe what that, I guess the process of the team and playing, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so we carry about 70 athletes. About half are international and half are American right now. We're at 13 different countries. Wow. And 15 different states. We have no rules as who plays and who doesn't play. We're kind of unapologetically competitive in our training environment and unapologetically supportive off the field. And you know, it's an attractive environment for people who want to kind of go to work every day and chip away at that stone and get better. And we just say we all train together, but you're going to be picked for whatever opportunities appropriate for you.
Got it. So your lineup may change like week to week, is what 100%. You're saying. Okay. 100%. Great. Coach Hundley, what about you? Well, what does your team usually look like typically?
Yeah, so we carry 45 guys on the roster. We're capped at that. Same as Coach Macy, no one's spot is set. We've had freshmen walk in and start. If they're good enough, they're going to play on the first side. And again, that could change week in, week out. And it's just whoever's showing up and putting in the work is going to be on the field and make the impact on the weekend.
Are there players that never play though, or do you make sure that they all get a chance to play?
We play A's and B's every weekend. So pretty much all 45 guys are getting some sort of game time on a weekend. Obviously that amount of time varies. But our guys, we're trying to build an environment where all 45 at any moment could step on the field and perform for us.
Okay. And Sherman, what about you?
Yeah, we carry our roster's capped at 60. Of those, just over half to 2/3 would be have rugby experience before they get here, and majority of those would have been recruited. Although our crossover athlete makes a big impact in our team, especially at Army. They recruit 80 football players per year because they're not impacted by the scholarship cap. So we get a lot of very good at crossover athletes. So we're sort of a blend in that way, which is unique because we don't have the international experience. We have one international player. He's Fijian. The Fijian Army sent him over. Bula Bula. He adds a lot of flavor to our game. That's sort of our makeup. We run during the year. We often will run 3 teams. When we play at home, we'll bring in another team to play our third group. But our third group throughout the year runs as what we call our OP4, which is the Army acronym for Opposition Force, basically a scout team. So that's their purpose. But we have a lot of we're pure meritocracy, a lot of movement through the teams, competition. We started 3 freshmen against Navy this fall. So that's shows you right there.
What could you share a little bit? And what I'd like to do, with these last couple minutes left of this session here, what I really want to do is for the families that are on, if we can kind of peek behind the curtain a little bit, but in your experience, have there been, if you have a memory, but what has either really helped make a player successful for you, or one that it didn't work out, that they, this player didn't do this beforehand, they weren't prepared for this in college, that they should be aware of, right? We've got some grade 9 and 10 on here too. So it's thinking ahead of, you're going to be going to college and you're going to be playing a sport and committing a lot of time. Those students that are really successful, what are some commonalities with them? And the ones that were not successful, maybe some of the things that were successful that are not as successful, if that makes sense. And that might help give some of these prospects out there some idea of things that they might not have thought of. I don't know if you want to start or if someone already has one ready to go.
I'm ready. I would just say humility. For me, West Point, again, we're a bit unique, but West Point's designed to make you struggle and fail and work through that. And what I've found is most of our freshmen haven't had a lot of challenges. They've worked hard, don't get me wrong, but they haven't really struggled to earn this opportunity, as in they were in a bad place and had to work their way out of it. And again, West Point's designed to put you in those positions to develop those skills, the grit and tenacity and perseverance. So what I've found is, and we coach this now, is get comfortable with with asking for help right away. Like, put your ego aside and be willing to say, hang on, like I don't get it. I don't get what's going on, because I think that, those guys tend to get the help, and people want to help people. And the ones that just kind of hide their deficiencies and struggles because they're, it's new to them and they're insecure about it, that those guys dig pretty big holes, and then it's kind of hard to get out of it. So humility, I think, understanding that it's okay to have some hardship. In fact, it's human. So that's what I would recommend.
Great. No, that's great. That's great advice. Coach Macy, you look like you had something.
Yeah, and I would piggyback off of that, and being really upfront about your struggles off the field as well. It's a huge shift going from high school to college, and working with the people around you who obviously care about you, who are mutually invested in your success, to set priorities and schedules, and they take care of that at West Point for you. But most students have so much time, and they really have to wrangle it and put it in place, according to their priorities. And if you don't do that early, things can get away from you in a hurry.
Okay. Coach Hundley, anything different you would think of?
Academics. That's the number one thing that takes people away from rugby. For me, is their academics. That's the first thing. Once once the academics hit, rugby is the first thing to disappear. Which Macy said, ask for help, right? For us, there's 45 guys on the team, and myself included, are here to help, and we're here to get you through those moments. The guys that manage the best are the guys that can manage their time the best, because then everything's okay. And they can, everything else works itself out.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, with a lot of the students I work with, and then I end up seeing, talking to them later when they're older or they've graduated. And one of the things most students end up saying is, I had no idea how hard college was gonna be. Especially for the students that were successful in high school. They were kind of like, especially the ones that kind of skated through, and they're like, school was kind of easy. When they get to college, all of a sudden, no one's reminding them to get their rugby stuff put together, right? Like, you've got a game and you've got to fly somewhere and you're there for a weekend. Did you pack correctly? I've had students, man, I got on the plane, I realized I forgot my cleats. I forgot my contact solution. Things like that usually maybe a mom or a dad is helping them do that. So getting those kind of basic practical things done when you're in high school, being able to do your own laundry or cook your own meals, manage your time, those are really, really important skills. The students I see that don't make it through their first year, it's because of things like that, like silly things. They're not managing their time correctly. Okay, so we're down to the last three. I have one last question that I want to make sure to touch on, because I do know we have some international folks on here. Any tips for international players who want to attend college in the US? Are you looking for anything different from an international player versus a US player?
I'll go first. No, I wouldn't say anything really different. I think the process is the same. It's about reaching out. It's about connecting. It's about getting to know you. So I think from all those aspects, it's the same as an American player.
I would agree, and I would jump back to what Coach Sherman was saying before about humility. Like, it's really easy as if you played South African schoolboy rugby in high school, it's really easy to think you're going to waltz into any training in America and like be a top dog. But that's just not the way it is. The standard here is actually pretty dang good, especially when you're in the top 10 of teams like we are, and all three of us are. And I would just come in and understand that there's things that you can learn from teammates from other places as well. Our sporting history in rugby is thin, but our sports history and knowledge in American students is so rich and deep, and you'll learn things from them that you would have never learned at home. And that's probably why you're here in the first place, right? Is to have this sort of this really broad cultural experience, right? So put away your own experience a little bit and come in with an open mind, and you'll get a lot more out of it.
Sherman, anything about international students, international players?
Nothing different there.
Okay. Great. All right, perfect. So I'm going to wrap it up because I know it's been an hour and I want to respect everyone's time. So I do want to just kind of say, first of all, thank you to the coaches for taking their time out of their day to update everyone here on what's been going on. At least my takeaway here is, truly, even though the recruiting process has slowed and it's different, it hasn't stopped. All three coaches and programs out there are still actively recruiting, even if it's kind of a little bit different. It's more like this, right? More virtually, more film, more contacts. Something that I share with a lot of my players is they've got to get in the mentality that they're building a relationship with you. So it might start with that questionnaire, but that's not where it ends. That if Coach Macy, Coach Hundley, Coach Sherman emails you back, you need to email them back, right? It's going to be like a tennis match, right? You send something, they ask for something, you've got to respond. So with that in mind, check your emails. I will be sending a follow-up, so check your emails. But that is where recruiting happens. The coaches will be communicating with you over email, and this should be going to the students. So the communication, I'm assuming from coaches, they don't want to talk to your parents. As much as your parents are lovely people, they will eventually be, having you on the field with them. So we really want the students to, kind of take that driver's seat, and they're going to be driving the process once that questionnaire is done. You're doing the meetings and all those sorts of things in person, and whatever else happens after that. So happy holidays to you all. Thank you so much, and have a good night, everyone.